I still remember the morning as if it happened yesterday. I was in my old office, making my first cup of coffee, the sun just peeking through the blinds, when Mom's assistant knocked on the door without waiting for a response and said, "She wants to see you downstairs. Now." My hand froze on the coffee pot. I'd been at the family business for 12 years. I built our events division from the ground up, negotiated dozens of vendor contracts, and turned our little catering arm into the area's top choice for weddings. But none of that mattered when Mom burst into the room without a greeting. She didn't smile. She didn't even hesitate. She looked at me like I was an inconvenience. "You're fired," she said, voice cold. "Go pack your things, effective immediately." I blinked. I must have heard her wrong. Me? Fired by my own mother? It felt like a twisted game. "Mom, come on. You can't mean that," I managed to say, forcing calm into my tone. She crossed her arms, jaw tight. "I absolutely mean it. It's time for a change. I need someone younger, more aggressive. You've had a good run, but you're dragging us down." My heart pounded in my ears. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to remind her I'd put in long nights, missed family holidays, swallowed my pride after my divorce just to keep this company afloat. But her gaze was unyielding. "I'm sorry," she said, as if that offered any consolation. I closed my eyes, forced myself to breathe slowly. "Understood," I said, voice steady but my hands shaking. I turned, stared at her briefly, and said, "Have a good day, Mom," before walking out of her office like I had somewhere else to be. Inside, I was falling apart. I walked back up to my office, packed my desk in silence. My assistant hovered by the doorway, eyes misty. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. I shook my head, trying to keep the lump in my throat from forming. "Don't make this harder," I whispered. I gathered my laptop, my favorite coffee mug, and the framed photo of my late dad, the one I'd signed at his funeral that read, "For our girl, keep the legacy alive." My chest tightened as I placed it in a box. 12 years. 12 I had poured blood and tears into this place, and now I was just out. I drove home in a daze, replaying every meeting, every board presentation, every all-nighter spent graphing, out wedding packages. None of it mattered. I felt hollow, like my identity had been snatched away. At home, I sat on the couch, hugged my half-empty mug of coffee, and stared at the TV without turning it on. Memories flooded. My first day as a 22-year-old fresh grad, Dad's proud grin when I'd closed our first major event, the day I'd negotiated a partnership with that international supplier that boosted our margins by 20%. All of it gone in a heartbeat. I barely slept that night. Thoughts churned. Was I really so replaceable? Had I misread the signs? But mostly I felt betrayed. Mom had been my mentor, my guide since Dad died, stepping into a role I'd thought would be ours together. And yet, here I was, exiled. I drifted in and out of half-dreams, dreams of walking back into the office, slamming my fist on her desk, demanding an explanation. But when morning came, I was still in my pajamas, hair a tangled mess, face puffy from tears. The phone rang just past 8:30 a.m., the number I didn't recognize. I let it ring, convinced I couldn't handle another blow. But after a few rings, curiosity won. I answered quietly, "Hello? Lily?" A deep voice. My breath paused. This is Dad. Even over the phone, I could hear the tension in his voice. Dad had been the company's heart and soul before he passed 5 years ago. If he was calling now, something serious was up. "Dad," I whispered. "I just walked into the office," he said, voice strained. "Your mom fired you?" I swallowed. "Yes." A long silence. Then he asked slowly, "Did she give you a reason?" I hesitated. "She said she wanted someone younger, more aggressive, that I was dragging the company down." More silence. Finally he spoke, voice firm, controlled. "Lily, did she look at the shareholder agreement? The one Dad and I revised before he died?" My jaw dropped. The shareholder agreement. The one clause Dad had insisted we include after all the turmoil with Uncle Jerry's takeover attempt. No, I said, throat tight. I don't think she did. Dad's next words hit me like a freight train. Because that agreement names you as the default CEO if any board member, especially your mother, removes you without cause. Legally, no one else can assume your position, and you are the only authorized signature on our new catering franchise deal. Without as you, that deal collapses. I froze. My coffee grew cold in my hand. The catering franchise deal, 6 months of negotiations, my idea for expansion, the carrot that would secure our future profits for years to come. If Mom didn't have me at the table, she had just made an irreversible mistake. Dad inhaled sharply. I'm heading home. I need you back. Today at 10 a.m., that franchise meeting is at 11:30, and you're not stepping back in until we sort this out. He hung up before I could say a word. I sank onto the couch. So she'd truly shot herself. In the foot without even reading that clause. A slow burn of something. I don't know if it was relief or vindication, rose in my chest. All night I had been drowning in hurt. Now I felt power. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I was curious. How fast could I leverage this error? At 9:15 a.m. my phone buzzed again. This time it was my younger sister, Emma. She and I hadn't always been close. We'd drifted after Dad died, her working in marketing for an agency in another city. But we'd texted occasionally. I let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, another buzz. I took a breath and pressed play. Lily, it's Emma. Her voice trembled. I pressed my palm to my heart. I heard about Mom this morning. Are you okay? My throat tightened. I'm working on it. Hold on, she said. Then a pause, longer than felt comfortable. Lily, there's something you need to know. Hang tight. Click. I stared at the ceiling. Emma had sounded frantic. At 9:30 a.m., another call, this time from our CFO, Marcus. He cleared his throat. Lily, I heard you were let go. But listen, you need to know, that franchise deal you struck, Mom didn't even read your signature block. Legally, you're the only one who can sign the final documents. I've checked with legal. They told me you're technically the CEO as soon as Mom removed you. The board's already drafting emergency minutes to appoint you. They'll vote at 10. I shut my eyes. My chest felt tight but alive. Thank you for letting me know, I whispered. He added, Emma's in her car. As soon as they finalize the minutes, she's going to swing by with the paperwork naming you CEO. You have exactly 20 minutes to get back. My breathing caught. I hung up, roused myself from the couch, and changed out of my pajamas. By 9:45, Emma was pulling into the driveway, papers flapping on the passenger seat. I opened the door as she jumped out, clutched the stack to her chest. Guys on the board are on their feet, she said, shaking her head. Mom's already drumming her fingers at the board meeting. She doesn't realize yet how screwed she is. I took the folder with shaking hands. Inside was an official board resolution. Effective immediately, Elizabeth Harper's removal from office is null and void. Lily Harper shall assume all CEO duties with full authority over company operations and the franchise expansion. My eyes stung. Emma gave me a shaky smile. You're our CEO, she said, voice soft. I stood frozen. 12 years of effort. I'd been fired for no reason, and now, by law, I was in full control. The power shift felt dizzying. At exactly 9:57 a.m., we walked into the boardroom together. The entire board, Mom, CFO Marcus, COO James, 2 outside directors, stared. As I stepped to the head of the table, Mom's face was a storm cloud. She tried to clear her throat, but no words came. Chairwoman walked up, tapped the copy of the resolution. Our father's intent was clear. Lily, the board unanimously voted in your favor. Effective immediately. You are CEO. We need you at that franchise meeting at 11:30. Lunch is served at noon in your office. My heart pounded. Mom slid into a seat at the far end of the table, arms folded. She opened her mouth, but the head director raised a hand. The decision is final. Mom's jaw tightened, eyes flicked to Emma, then to me. I nodded once. Understood. I turned, letting the weight of the director's gavel echo in my ears. I walked out of that room with my head high, but inside, I was trembling. I'd never wanted this moment to come through my mother's mistake. Still, the wind had shifted, and I intended to use that gust to propel the business forward. By 10:15 a.m., I was back in my old office. Only now it was mine again, with new signage on the door. Lily Harper, CEO. I sat at Dad's old leather chair, let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The desk was exactly as I left it. Dad's framed picture, my coffee mug, the sheaf of notes planning our franchise launch. I pressed my fingers to the wood, feeling the grain, remembering. At 10:30, Mom walked in without knocking. She tried to say something conciliatory. Lily, I didn't know about the clause. I was overwhelmed. But I shook my head. I held up a finger gently. Mom, we can talk later. Right now I have a franchise partner to reassure. Please leave me to prepare. She stared at me, hurt and anger warring in her eyes, then closed the door gently behind her. I exhaled, knowing this wasn't personal. It was business. And truthfully, I'd felt her drift for months. New friends, new advisors, new priorities. But when it mattered most, she didn't see the clause that protected me. She didn't see me. At 11 a.m., CFO Marcus knocked and stuck his head in. They're on their way. VIPs from the franchise? Their CEO is a stickler for details. He'll want to see you sign off personally. I nodded. Send them in at 11:30. I'll be ready. Marcus lingered. There's something else. The board wants to make sure you have the support you need. They've asked me to stand by in case anything goes sideways. I offered a small smile. Thank you. That means a lot. He nodded and slipped out. At 11:27 a.m., I took a final look at the contract documents, the maps, the revenue projections, the supply chain agreements. Everything was in order. Dad had been meticulous. I'd been thorough. I glanced at the clock. 11:29. I stood, smoothed my blazer, and walked toward the glassed-in conference room. I walked past Mom in the hall. She looked at me with a mixture of resentment and grudging respect. I didn't meet her eyes. Instead, I focused on the door, pushed it open. Inside, the franchise team sat stiffly, eyes trained on me as I approached the head of the table. Their CEO, Mr. Sinclair, nodded curtly. He didn't rise, but gestured to an empty chair. Ms. Harper, he said in his clipped British accent, we're pleased to meet you. I offered a polite smile. Thank you for coming. I apologize for the confusion earlier. Let's get started. For the next hour, we worked seamlessly. I answered every question, addressed each contingency. When Mr. Sinclair commented on the detailed Turkish supplier clause, I see you remembered our stipulation about sourcing olives from Hatay province. I replied in Turkish, Afiyet olsun, and his eyebrows shot up. You remembered the language preference? Impressive. That small gesture sealed their trust. By 12:30 p.m., we were signing the final documents. I slid the pen across the table. Mr. Sinclair signed. We shook hands. The deal was done. Relief flooded me. As the last page was initialed, I looked at the franchise partners. Welcome to Harper Catering, I said softly. They smiled. I knew this partnership would transform our business. Just after 1:2 p.m., I left the conference room and found Mom leaning against the wall. She looked pale, more from shock than anything else. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words emerged. I nodded to her, turned down the hall. I didn't look back. By 1:15, I was back in my office, reclining in Dad's old chair, letting the adrenaline ebb. It all felt surreal. Fired one day, reinstated and triumphant the next. But there was a chill behind my triumph, because just as the board had rallied around me, Mom had retreated, her face unreadable. I'd seen that before, in the eyes of people who lose control. They don't disappear. They plot. At 2:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Emma again. She whispered, "You should come down to the operations floor." My pulse quickened. I hurried down 2 flights of stairs to the production hall. The fluorescent lights were harsh, machinery hummed, and a handful of employees, line supervisors, event coordinators, stood huddled. They parted as I approached. Emily, our lead event planner, wrapped an arm around a younger coordinator. "They're saying you'll fire us all, given the change in leadership," she said. She looked like she wanted to cry. I forced a calm smile. "No, I'm here to support you. I know there's been a lot of uncertainty. Let me answer any questions." They exchanged glances, then one by one asked what would happen to their positions, benefits, schedules. I reassured them. No one is losing their jobs. In fact, with this franchise deal, we'll need to hire more staff, event stylists, kitchen hands, drivers. Our goal is expansion, not contraction. Relief washed over several faces. By 3 p.m., the group had dispersed, muttering renewed confidence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Mom's influence would surface again. At 3:45 p.m., I decided to email the team a brief note. Thank you for your patience today. We have a long road ahead, but together, we'll make this the best year in our history. Rest up. We start early tomorrow. Lily, CEO. I clicked send and leaned back. My coffee had gone stone cold hours ago. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Mom's retreat and how she'd react next. Was this over? Probably not. Later that evening, around 7 p.m., as I packed to leave, my inbox pinged, a PDF marked reimbursements. I clicked it. It was my travel reimbursement from last month, flights and hotels for negotiating a partnership in Dubai. The amount was correct, but the account number had been changed. My eyes widened. I emailed accounting immediately. I think there's a mistake. This isn't my bank account. Their reply came in 10 minutes. All reimbursements have been processed. Contact HR if you have questions. I felt my pulse spike. That wasn't accounting's usual curt tone. Someone had rerouted my funds. At 7:15 p.m., I picked up my phone. Marcus, it's Lily. Did you see the reimbursement file? He emailed himself away into speaker. Yes, it hit the wrong account. We believe someone changed it in the system. I'm looking into it now. I'll get back to you. I thanked him and hung up. My stomach turned. It wasn't a simple clerical error. This was deliberate. Whoever had done this knew exactly how to make me look dishonest. By 8:30 p.m., I was back in my apartment, dinner half-eaten on the coffee table. I had a sinking suspicion about Mom's new executive assistant, Gina. She'd started 6 months ago, exclusively reporting to Mom. She had that quiet, watchful demeanor of someone who's always in the background, collecting information. I sifted through emails I'd sent in the last week. None had been forwarded or replied to by Gina. But the accounting error had to start somewhere. I opened my laptop and pulled up our email server logs, an unauthorized login by Gina's account to my reimbursement file at 6:45 p.m. So, it was her. My jaw clenched. Mom must have leaned on her to sabotage me. I leaned back and let out a quiet sigh. I'd survived betrayal before, but this was in my own family. It stung like acid. I pulled out my notebook, Dad's old leather-bound one with his name embossed. I began logging every strange occurrence. The reimbursement change, the vendor, contracts that had been altered without my knowledge, a copy of the meeting notes where Mom had told the ops team that, as CEO, I'd be stepping in. I wrote down times, dates, copies of suspicious emails. I'd learned from Dad that paper trails are more powerful than words in situations like this. And in this business, the truth would be my only weapon. At 9:45 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Emma again. Lily, you need to know something else. I overheard Mom on a call earlier. She's telling Gina to watch your every move, log anything she can use to undermine you. They're meeting tomorrow morning to discuss my own marketing, budget, and whether to reassign it away from you. They want to make me look bad if you look good. My heart sank. This was bigger than I thought. Mom was orchestrating a quiet coup to push me out. But I wouldn't let that happen. Not after everything I'd built. I replied, thanks. I'm documenting everything. I won't let them win. Emma's reply came almost instantly. Be careful. I'm terrified for what they'll do next. I set my phone down and stared at the city lights outside my window. It was late, but sleep wouldn't come easy. I clutched my father's notebook and thought about the next day. The board meeting, the franchise rollout, and now the looming threat of sabotage. I closed my eyes and let out a breath. I wasn't sure what tomorrow held, but I knew I needed to be ready. The next morning at 7:30 a.m., I arrived early to the office via the main entrance. It felt good to walk through those doors as CEO rather than a disgraced daughter. The receptionist nodded and whispered, "Morning, Ms. Harper." I gave a polite nod, then headed straight to my office. At 8:09 a.m., I opened my inbox. First item, an email from HR marked urgent performance review. My pulse spiked. I clicked. It was a complaint lodged against me by Gina. Alleged misuse of company funds for personal travel. Photos of a vacation from 5 years ago, Mom's business trip, had been pinned as a business expense. Someone had dug through old files to frame me. I gritted my teeth. The email had a timestamp. Gina's login at 2:15 a.m. last night. I printed the email and the receipt records. The expense was correctly coded years ago. Gina had forged a new entry. At 8:15, CFO Marcus knocked. I motioned him in and laid out the evidence. My actual travel records, the original receipts, and the forged complaint. He studied them, eyes widening. This is serious. You sure Gina did this? I nodded. The logs prove it. We need to escalate. Marcus exhaled. I'll inform the board. They'll want an internal audit. I nodded. Good. And I want to attend every step. If I'm guilty by gossip, I want the chance to clear my name in front of them. He gave a solemn nod and left. I sank into my chair, heart pounding. Mom was playing for keeps. At 9 a.m., the board convened in our usual glassed-in room. I took a seat beside Marcus. Mom sat across from me, serene, as if she'd done nothing wrong. The head director began, "We have an urgent matter, an alleged misuse of funds by our CEO." He paused, eyes flicking to Mom as though seeking her input. She replied coolly, "I had nothing to do with this, but we need to handle it swiftly." I fought the urge to roll my eyes. The director continued, "We have evidence suggesting an expense claim was falsified under Ms. Harper's name. We'll conduct an internal audit. Ms. Harper, you're invited to present any defense now or at a later date." I raised my hand. "I'd like to present now." He nodded. I laid out the receipts, logs, discrepancy, and time-stamped the forged entry. I watched Mom's expression flicker, something like panic, before settling back into her professional mask. The director studied me, then turned to Mom. "Mom, is there anything you want to add?" She forced a polite smile. "No, I trust the process." I sensed her concealment. She had orchestrated this, but she wouldn't admit it. The director tapped his pen. "We'll suspend Ms. Harper's expense privileges until the audit is complete, but she will retain CEO duties in the interim. No one else can sign off on any reimbursements or travel funds." My chest tightened, but inside, I felt a spark of victory. The board couldn't remove me. Legally, they couldn't. The audit would clear me, and Gina would be exposed. Mom's next move would be to tough it out, but the board had already sided with me in principle. By 10:30 a.m., I was back at my desk, scanning through old invoices, ensuring nothing else had been tampered with. I printed out invoices from the last year. As I compared them line by line, another red flag appeared. A vendor contract I'd finalized, one that would supply linens for the new franchise, had a changed payment schedule. Instead of net 30, it read net 15. The vendor would demand immediate payment. That would create a cash crunch, undermine the franchise. I recognized the vendor's name in only one context. Mom's new business partner, Alan Rivers, had pushed that change. I scanned the email trail. Sure enough, Gina's login had forwarded an altered contract to the vendor at 8:45 last night. She'd copied my name on the thread to legitimize it. If the vendor insisted on net 15, we'd have to divert funds from payroll. People would panic. It was another layer of sabotage designed to make me look incompetent. I slammed my fist on the desk and grabbed my father's notebook. I started jotting everything: forged emails, altered contracts, manipulated vendor terms. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. This would not stand. At 11:45 a.m., CFO Marcus knocked. "They need you in the audit war room. Gina's login logs and contract changes are now part of the evidence." I nodded. We walked down to the former supply closet that had been converted into the audit room. A cramped space with file boxes stacked, logs open on monitors, a whiteboard scribbled with timelines. David, the lead auditor, greeted me. "Ms. Harper, thank you for joining. We've gathered the logs tied to Gina's account. Emails, contract versions, vendor invoices. The pattern is clear. Internal sabotage. We're tracing IP addresses, login times." I scanned the board. 8:45 p.m. Altered vendor contract sent. 2:15 a.m. Forged complaint filed. 9 a.m. Reimbursement rerouted. Mom's face flashed in my mind. I took a breath. What's the next step? David adjusted his glasses. We present our findings to the board at 2 p.m. All parties involved will be there. We'll show the evidence, irreversible tampering by Gina's account, and identify any approvals Mom gave. You'll have the floor to speak. Relief surged through me. Finally, the truth would come to light. I nodded solemnly. Thank you. I'll be there. I left the war room and returned to my office, eyes stinging. I paced, revisiting every moment from Mom's cold dismissal to this. In the space of 24 hours, my role had flipped from fired to CEO under siege, but now the board was ready to see it all. As I stared out at the late autumn sky, I steeled myself for the showdown. At exactly 1:50 p.m., I entered the glass boardroom. Mom sat at the head of the table, strangely pale, as though she'd lost her appetite. Beside her, Alan Rivers shifted uncomfortably. The directors, Marcus and COO James, all faced the projector screen. When David walked in, carrying a laptop, Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. David clicked his remote. Slide 1. Gina Rivers, Logan activity versus document alterations. A table appeared. Times, actions, file hashes. Mom's assistant had used Gina's credentials to access every relevant file at odd hours. Slide 2. Vendor contract comparison. Original versus altered. The original contract had net 30 payment terms, signed by me. The altered version, signed by L. Harper, had net 15. Slide 3, forged expense report, original versus server logs. The original was marked as reimbursed to me 5 years ago. The forged claimed a new trip, payment redirect. Slide 4, email trails, timestamp mismatch. I watched as the board stared in silence. Mom's face went ashen. This is incredible, she mumbled. The head director turned to her. Elizabeth, these alterations could have sunk the franchise deal and severely harmed the company's reputation. Care to explain? Mom's eyes flicked to me, then to David. She swallowed, voice tight. I didn't know what was happening. Gina handled those files. I assumed she was acting under my direction. The director raised an eyebrow. Yet all these actions originated from her login, and you instructed her on what to monitor. Mom's shoulders slumped. The air in the room crackled. The director clicked off the slide deck. This is unacceptable. We have clear evidence of deliberate sabotage. Ms. Harper, do you have anything to add? I stood, heart thundering. I took the folder of my compiled evidence, handwritten notes, printed logs, copies of each forged document. I laid them neatly on the table. I've dedicated a dozen years to this company, I began, voice steady but fierce. I stayed through my divorce, through sleepless nights because I believed in our family's legacy. Today, I stand here, not because I sought power, but because I refused to let that legacy be destroyed by petty vendettas. Everything you see on that screen is a violation of trust. My trust in my own mother and in our core values. I humbly ask that you remove Gina from any access, and that you hold anyone complicit accountable. I looked at Mom, meeting her gaze. And I ask that you, as board members, decide what kind of leadership you want. One that fosters unity and respect, or one that resorts to deception. A hush fell over the room. Mom blinked back tears, her face a mask of shame. Alan shifted uncomfortably. The head director cleared his throat. We will convene an emergency vote. Until that vote, Ms. Harper, you will remain CEO with full authority. Gina Rivers is to be suspended immediately and her access revoked. He looked at Mom. And Mrs. Harper, as a director of this company, you are to explain your oversight role in this matter. The board will address that separately. Mom swallowed, nodded, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I understand. I felt a wave of something. Relief, vindication, exhaustion washed through me. I stayed standing until the director nodded, then resumed my seat. Mom's assistant was led out by HR. The board sat in silence for a moment before the director. Continued, We appreciate your composure, Ms. Harper. We'll issue a formal statement after the meeting. By 3:30 p.m., the board had reconvened its regular meeting. They briefly discussed budget allocations, franchise marketing strategy, and expansion timelines. All under my authority as CEO. Mom sat quietly, hands folded in her lap. Every so often, her eyes flicked to me, but she offered no words. I led the meeting with confidence, something I hadn't felt since Dad passed. Plans for the new franchise poured out naturally. Vendor selection, staffing projections, marketing, rollouts. At 5 p.m., the meeting ended. As people filed out, Marcus approached. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," he said quietly. "Don't be," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just glad it's over." He nodded, then added, "The board wants to discuss your future role beyond CEO. There's talk of making you president of Harper Holdings. They feel you've earned it." My chest tightened. After everything, they still saw something in me. I nodded, unsure what to say. "Thank you," I managed. That evening, I walked to my car in the empty parking lot. The lights above flickered. I felt small, momentarily disoriented. 12 years of work, a firing, reinstatement, public humiliation, mostly from my own mother. And yet, here I was, CEO, vindicated, with a path forward. I whispered to the night air, "Dad, I hope you're proud." A cold breeze drifted through the lot, but somewhere in that chill I felt warmth, like Dad's old voice telling me to keep going. The next morning, as I entered the building at 7:45 a.m., the hallways were quiet but charged. I passed Mom in the lobby. She was speaking in hushed tones with Alan Rivers, both glancing in my direction. I walked past without a word, focusing. On the reception desk, the receptionist offered me a warm, "Good morning, Ms. Harper." I nodded and headed to my office. By 8:30 a.m., I sat behind the desk, reviewing a draft press release about our franchise partnership. I was customizing the language to emphasize our family-owned roots and community focus. As I edited, my door opened and 2 junior coordinators peeked in. One, Mark, timidly said, "Ms. Harper, we wanted to thank you for the support you showed. Yesterday, we were scared we might lose our jobs." My heart warmed. I gestured them in. "I'm not going anywhere. We're expanding, hiring more staff. I need you both to help me train the new hires." Their faces lit up. They nodded, beaming, and left. I exhaled, leaning back. This, keeping our team safe, meant more to me than any title. At 9:15 a.m., Emma arrived in my office, coffee in hand. "I had to stop by. Are you okay?" I offered her a small smile. "I am now." She handed me a mug. I took a sip, bitter, but comforting. "Thank you for everything yesterday," I said. She hugged me. "You saved this company. Dad's spirit must be looking down right now." I closed my eyes, letting tears prick. Emma pulled back. "Come on. The board is meeting at 10 to discuss your promotion. You want to be there?" I nodded. "Let's go." At 10 a.m., the board gathered again. Mom, Alan, Marcus, COO James, 2 outside directors. Mom was silent, eyes cast downward. The head director spoke. "We want to honor Lily's resilience. We propose elevating her to president of Harper Holdings, reporting directly to the board, overseeing all subsidiaries, including the catering franchise, retail bakery, and our event production arm. As CEO, you already run day-to-day operations. As president, you will set long-term vision for all divisions. Please consider..." I felt tears prickly at the corners of my eyes. This wasn't something I asked for. I'd simply wanted fairness. But Dad had always believed in rewarding merit, not nepotism. I cleared my throat. "Thank you. I'd be honored, but only if I can implement changes I believe in. We need better transparency, an anonymous reporting system so no one else feels powerless. I want to reach out to former employees who left and ask what went wrong. I want to shape a culture where fear has no place." The directors exchanged glances, then nodded. The head director turned to Mom. "Elizabeth?" She looked up. Voice, barely a whisper. I approve. Lily, I trust you to rebuild what I let falter." Her eyes glistened. I managed a small nod. The vote was unanimous. By 11:30 a.m., I sat in my new corner office with a view of the city. The letter confirming my role as president lay on my desk, signed by the chairwoman. I pressed my palm to the cool glass and exhaled. It had taken losing everything to get here. But now I had a chance to build something better. Dad's portrait looked down from the wall, his kind eyes, his gentle smile. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I won't let you down." That afternoon, I hosted the first of many town hall meetings in the main hall. Employees gathered, some hesitant, some excited. I stood at the podium and addressed them. I know there's been pain, fear, and uncertainty. I want you to know we're turning a new page. Starting today, anyone can report concerns anonymously. We'll have open forums every month. This company belongs to all of us, not just a single family member. I intend to honor that. A hush fell over the crowd, then a ripple of applause. I exhaled, feeling the weight in my chest lighten, replaced by purpose. In the days that followed, I reinstated 2 team members who had been quietly pushed out last year, Jane from marketing and Carlos from event logistics. I handed each a letter. We're sorry you were forced to leave. We want you back. Their faces lit up with gratitude. I felt a lump in my throat. This was why I'd stayed. Because people mattered. Not just profits or power. By the end of that week, the franchise's grand opening was scheduled, our press release went out, and new hires were being onboarded. Mom began to retreat into her role as advisor. She offered input, but let me lead. We met in my office once to discuss a product line for wedding favors. She apologized quietly. Lily, I'm sorry for everything. I thought I was making the best decision at the time. I was scared of change. I reached across the desk and placed my hand over hers. We all make mistakes. It's how we fix them that counts. She nodded and squeezed my hand. Later that evening, as I locked up and walked to my car, I looked back at the illuminated office windows. This building had seen my greatest triumphs and my deepest betrayals. But now, it felt like home again. I slid into my car, took out Dad's notebook from the passenger seat, and leafed through the pages. His notes about contracts, his reminders to always act with integrity, treat your employees like family. I closed the book, took a deep breath, and whispered, "This is for you, Dad, and for everyone who believed in me." I started the engine, and as I drove away, the city lights blurred past. I didn't know what challenges still lay ahead. Mom's lingering resentment, competitors smelling weakness, the constant pressure of expansion. But I did know one thing. I would face them as myself, not as a daughter under her mother's thumb, not as someone overshadowed by legacy. I was Lily Harper, president, chosen by law, validated by truth, and driven by the promise that competence and compassion would shape our future. And I refused to let anyone, boss's son, sister's whisper, or mother's betrayal, take that from me again.